Hello and welcome to Nithrania YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the board game rules. My name is Branislav Berec, and in this video we're going to learn how to play the new game from Fabio Lopiano called Merv. Back in 13th century, Merv was maybe the largest city in the world, having the population of more than 500,000 people. Some sources even say it was 1 million. Before it was destroyed by raiders. So in this game you're going to help build the city, build the walls against these raiders, and here is how it plays. To set the game up, first take this market tile and place it with the random side up in the center of the game board. Then randomly place all the city tiles on the game board. Place all the wall tiles on their designated spaces on the game board. Place all the upgrade tiles on the Mosque track and one camel on a starting space of each path. Sort the contract cards by their bag or by their influence value and create 6 stacks of these cards. Each group will have 2 identical stacks, and in each stack sort the cards by their points value in the top right hand corner. Then place these stacks on their designated spaces alongside the game board. Then place one camel on each of the inner cities of the marketplace. Shuffle the deck of Caravanasary cards and draw 8 of them face up on the designated spaces along the other side of the game board. Then take as many camels as there are players in the game and start placing one camel on each card, starting with the card furthest from the deck. So in a 3-player game it would look like this. You can now return all the remaining camels back into the box. They will not be used in the game. Sort the breakthrough tiles by their type and place them in this library area. Finally, place the year marker on the first space of the year track. Give each player all the components of one color, and by the way, these trays are not included in the game. Take the largest meeples and place them in a random order in this top left corner of the city. This is the random starting player order. And place one disc of each player on the 0 space of the scoring track, on the first space of this influence track, and on the first space of the favor track. The game is played over 3 years, and in each year there's an action phase, the invasion phase, and the scoring phase. There is an exception: during the first year there is no invasion phase. These action phases are basically where players make all the decisions in the game. Invasion and scoring phases are the simple administration phases. Each action phase consists of 4 rounds, and they correspond to 4 sides of the city. During each round, each player will perform exactly 1 turn. On your turn, you have to take your master meeple, place the meeple in one of the empty spaces on that side of the city, then activate one of the sides from the corresponding column, or over here from the corresponding row. After activation, you will get resources and perform the action determined by the tile. After all players have taken their turns, they will determine the player order for the next round, and then, using the new player order, players will have to choose one empty slot in the corresponding side of the city, activate one of the tiles in that row, generate resources, and perform the action from the activated tile. After each player performs 1 turn on each side of the city, the year will end, and then the invasion phase will take place, except for the first year, and then the scoring phase. At the end of the 3rd year, the game will be over. You will perform 1 final scoring, and then the player with the most points is the winner. Each action phase has 4 rounds corresponding to the 4 sides of the city, and during each round, each player will perform exactly 1 turn, starting with the first player in the player order and continuing to the last. The first thing you have to do on your turn is to choose one of the available action slots and move your meeple to that action slot. After that, you will activate the corresponding column, or over here you would activate the corresponding row. The next player in the player order must choose one of the remaining available action slots. Each action slot can only contain maximum 1 meeple. So in the second step, after you choose the action slot, you have to activate one of the building sites in the corresponding column, or in the next round it will be one of the building sites in the corresponding row. You can activate a site without the building. In that case, you must place one of your buildings on that site, or you can activate the site which already has a building on it, either your own one or the opponent's. Then in the third step, you will generate resources. Based on the tile you activate, let's say the yellow player would activate this empty site and place their building on that site. You will generate resources from the activated site, so in this case it would be one orange cube, and then all other sites with a building of the same color. So in this case it's yellow building, so the yellow player would also generate one 10 cube. Both cubes would be then placed into the yellow player's personal supply. If you would decide to activate a building site with a building of another player, you will generate resources in the same way as you do when you activate your buildings. So here the yellow player would gain one orange cube, one teal cube. Here it would be one white cube, and here another orange. So yellow player would gain 4 cubes. And then the owner of those buildings, blue player in this case, would also receive some resources. They would receive all the resources from the activated site. So in this case it would be one teal and one orange cube. And then they would get resources from all other upgrades in that activated column. In this case it would be white cube. Other sites with blue buildings without any upgrades wouldn't generate any resources. Then in the fourth step of your turn, you will perform an action. You can either perform the action from the activated site, or you can always gain one favor or deploy one soldier. I will talk about those actions in just a few minutes. If you activate this center column or the center row, so for example if the yellow player would place their meeple in this action slot and they would activate this building, they would generate resources, they would be able to perform an action. In addition, they can also trade at this camel market. If you want, and if you have a camel, you can place that camel on any empty space in the market and take the corresponding reward. Or you can take all the camels from that camel market and place them in your personal reserve. Those symbols on the market tile are pretty self-explanatory, but if needed, you can find their explanations in the rulebook. And finally, anytime on your turn, you can fulfill one or more contracts from this display. However, to do that, you must have the required influence, which is stated in the bottom right-hand corner of each contract card, and you can see your current influence level on this influence track. At the moment, blue and red player don't even have the one influence, so these two players may not fulfill any contracts at the moment. If the blue player would be in this space, for example, blue player would be able to fulfill level 1 contracts, however, not the level 2 contracts yet, and the yellow player may fulfill any contract at the moment. In addition to the influence level, you must also have all the required resources. If you do, you can take the contract card, place it in front of you, you must spend 1 cube of any color, and then place the required scrolls and goods on that card. In this case it would be 1 scroll, 1 rare good, and 1 common good. After fulfilling the contract, score the victory points immediately and gain the reward. In this case it would be 1 favor. Apart from the favor, you can get soldier as a reward. Don't discard those scrolls and good tokens, they still count during the scoring phase. At the end of the round, when all players have taken their turn, the new player order has to be determined. Now, starting with the player who is furthest away from this player order, in this case the red player, that player will choose the position for the next round. Normally, they would place their meeple to the last position in the current player count, so in a 3-player game they would go to the 3rd position. If the player wants to move to a higher position, for each position they skip, they have to place 1 camel from their personal supply to that space. So if the red player would decide to go first, they would have to spend 2 camels. Now the yellow player has to decide whether they would go 3rd or 2nd. If they would decide to go third, they would simply take the camel and go to the third position. If the yellow player would decide to go second, for each position they skip, they have to pay 1 camel. However, after moving to the second position, they would take the camel from that space and place it in their personal supply. Now, the blue player would only be left with the third position, but they would gain 2 camels as a compensation. Then, with the new player order, you can begin the new round. When you activate the site with this symbol, you may take cards from this Caravanasary queue. To do that, you need to spend cubes, and all those cubes must be of the same color. So, for example, to take 3 cards, you would have to spend 3 cubes of the same color, or you can always choose a white cube as a wild instead of the cube of another color. Then, for each cube you spend, you can take 1 card from the queue. Now, you take the cards one at a time, and you can always take the card which is at the end of the queue. After you take the card, now this one is at the end of the queue, and so on and so forth. If there are any cards with camels on them, you can take any card with the camel. It doesn't have to be from the end of the queue. Or, as this symbology indicates, you can consider cards with camels on them as if they were not in the queue. So, this card would be actually at the end of the queue, and you would be allowed to take that card. After that, again skipping the cards with camels on them, this card would be at the end of the queue as indicated over here, and you would be able to take that card, and so on and so forth. Anytime on your turn, you can add a camel on the last card in the queue which doesn't have the camel, and this way you can get to the card which you really want, because this one will be now considered at the end of the queue, skipping all the cards with the camel. Each card has a different spice shown, and there are 4 types of spice in the game. Now, the position of your disc on this influence track indicates how many different types of spices you may have. In this example, a red player can only have the cards with 1 type of spice. So, if that red player would choose this card, that player can only collect these type of cards from this Caravanasary queue. After taking this card, red player would not be able to take other types of spices because of that limitation. Blue player would be able to have 2 different types of spices, and yellow player can take any card from the Caravanasary. As indicated by these icons, when you collect 1 pair of identical cards, you get a bonus. You get the bonus only 1 time, and in this case you would get 1 white bonus upgrade. After you take the bonus, to get another one, you would have to collect another pair. At the end of the action, slide all the cards towards the end of the queue and refill the empty spaces with new cards from the deck. If the deck runs out, refill as many spaces as you can, and then no more cards will be added. When you activate the site with this icon, with this symbol, you can take scrolls. You have to spend cubes, and those cubes must be of a different color. That means you can spend maximum 4 different colors of cubes and take 4 scrolls. Remember, you can always use white cube instead of the colored cube, and you can even spend more white cubes, replacing a different color each time. As soon as you collect first 2 scrolls, you may take one of these breakthrough tiles from this teal deck. You can take a look at all those tiles, choose one of them and return the others to the space on the game board. As soon as you collect 4 scrolls, including the ones on contract cards, take one of the breakthrough tiles from this deck, and similarly, as soon as you collect 6 and 8 scrolls, take one breakthrough tile from this deck and then from this one. After that, you may still collect more scrolls for the scoring phase, however you will not get any more breakthrough tiles. In general, blue tiles will give you a discount when taking specific actions. Red tiles will allow you to choose one additional color as the wild color. 10 tiles allow you to take immediate action without paying the cost of that action. And purple tiles give you another immediate reward. When you activate a site with this marketplace symbol, you can place a disc in one of these cities and establish a trading post there. When you place your first disc, it has to be one of these 4 inner cities. When you are the first one to place a disc in a city, take the Camel. When you take the marketplace action later in the game, you can establish another trading post, and again it can be one of the inner cities and even the city with another player's disc. Or you can place a disc in outer city which is connected to an inner city with your trading post. The first player to place a disc in an outer city gains 1 favor. Then, after establishing a trading post, as part of the same marketplace action, you can buy goods in cities. You can buy maximum 1 from each city. If you buy the goods from the city where you have a trading post, simply pay the depicted resource and take the corresponding token. Common goods only cost 1 resource, rare goods cost 2 resources. If you want to buy goods from the city where you don't have the trading post, let's say you would want to buy it from this city, you have to place a camel on the road from the city where you have a trading post, connecting the city where you don't have that trading post. So in case you would like to buy goods from this city and you have the resources, you would have to place 1 camel over here, 1 camel to this road to get from Merv to this outer city. Then after spending all the resources, take all the goods you have bought and place them in your personal supply. At the end of the action, if you have placed any camels on the roads, place them on the cards in the Caravanasary queue. In the unlikely case if the queue would be full, place them in the market in the city center. When you activate a site with this Mosque symbol, you can advance on this Mosque track as many spaces as you want. To advance your disc, you must spend required resources. When you take this action for the first time, you may choose any path you want. However, only the first person to choose a specific path will take the camel as a bonus. Other players would still be able to take the same path, but they wouldn't take the camel as a bonus. During one action, you may advance as many spaces as you want or as you can afford with your resources. For each space you reach, gain the indicated rewards or bonuses. Again, you'll find those descriptions in the rulebook, however, I want to talk about these bonus tiles. When you take the upgrade tile, you may place it on any side with your building. The side with this upgrade will always generate white cube. When you place the upgrade tile and you place it on a building where you have a soldier, that soldier is returned back to your personal supply. You may never place an upgrade on a site with another upgrade. As the track converges to just single path, multiple players may have their disc on the same space. However, each player may have maximum 1 disc on the Mosque track. When you reach these top 4 spaces of the Mosque track, there is a very thin white line over here, which means you get both the victory point or the victory points and also the reward on the left side of that space. When you reach the last space, you will score 4 victory points immediately and you will score these bonus points at the end of each scoring phase. When you activate the site with this symbol, you can place courtiers in this palace, and these courtiers score victory points during each scoring phase. You may place as many courtiers in a palace during one action as you want, however, for each one you place, you have to pay the cost. When you place your first courtier in the entire palace, you have to pay 1 resource cube of the color determined by the hall where you place that courtier. In this example, blue player would have to pay 1 teal cube. When you place the second courtier, you would have to pay 2 resource cubes. Here it would be 2 teal cubes. If you place your third courtier, you have to pay 3 cubes. Here it would be 3 10 cubes, and so on and so forth. Always count the number of courtiers in the entire palace, not just in that one hall. Now, when you place the courtier in the first space in the hall, you immediately gain 1 favor. Each hall can have maximum 3 courtiers. I'll talk about scoring in more detail during the scoring phase. When you activate the site with this symbol, you can build any number of wall segments and gates in any combination you want. Walls protect buildings from invasion during the invasion phase. To buy the wall segment or the gate, you have to pay the indicated resources, and when you build gates, gates can only be placed on these spaces, and when you build walls, walls can only be placed on the wall spaces. When you build a wall or a gate, you will gain influence if you protect some buildings with that wall. Walls protect buildings in the first and the second space in the corresponding row or column. So this wall would protect buildings at these two sides, this one protects these two buildings. When you protect your own building, you gain 1 influence, even if there is a soldier there. If you protect the building of another player, you gain 2 influence. When you build multiple walls and multiple gates, if you protect multiple buildings, you gain influence for each one you build. I have already mentioned the influence track in the video. The position of your disk determines the contracts you can fulfill, number of spices you can have, and when you reach these spaces, score the indicated number of victory points immediately. When your disk is at the end of the track and you would have to gain more influence, gain 1 favor instead. On your turn, when you activate a site, instead of taking the action which is depicted on that site, you have 2 other options. You can gain a favor or deploy a soldier. When you gain a favor, simply move your disk on the favor track 1 space to the right. When you enter the space with the victory points, score those victory points immediately. When you're at the end of the track and you would have to gain more favor, gain 1 influence instead. Then, when you spend favor, you don't score those victory points. However, when you gain favor again, you will score those victory points even if you scored them before. The second option you have when you don't want to activate the action on the tile you activate is to deploy a soldier. You can deploy a soldier on any tile which doesn't have the upgrade, which doesn't have other soldiers, and which is not fully protected by walls. Walls protect first 2 sides behind those walls, so this building and this one are already fully protected because they have walls from both sides. If you deploy a soldier to a side with your building, you gain 1 influence. If you deploy a soldier to a side with an opponent's building, you gain 2 influence. After the action phase is over, in the second year and the third year, the invasion phase will take place. Mongols will attack the city from all directions, and in each row and column, first 2 sides will be attacked. That means that all the sides will be attacked apart from the central market, unless the sides are protected by walls or soldiers. To protect one building completely, you need either 1 soldier or you need walls from both directions. This one is protected because there's a wall from this direction and also from this one. This building, although protected from this direction with this wall, is not protected from this direction. When the building is attacked, you have 2 options. You can either destroy the building and return it to your personal supply, however all the upgrades remain in place, or you can pay the ransom. To pay ransom, you have to spend 1 resource of the type produced by that site. In this example, it would be either the purple cube or 1 tan cube, or you can always spend white cube as a wild resource. And if the site has white upgrade, you can actually spend any cube there. When you pay ransom this way, the building stays in its place. Then all the buildings which are not protected by walls or soldiers and where the owner decided not to pay the ransom are destroyed. Then remove all the cubes that were paid as ransom and also remove all the soldiers from the city, even if they were not needed to protect the buildings. With that, the invasion phase is over and we can move to the scoring phase. At the end of each year, there is a scoring phase. First of all, score the courtiers in the palace. For each courtier you have there, you must spend 1 favor. If you wouldn't have enough favor, like the blue player here has 3 courtiers but only 2 favor, spend all the favor you have, and then you have to say which courtiers will score. For 2 favor, only 2 courtiers may score. It may be these 2 or this one and this one. It's your decision. Then each courtier in this purple hall will score 1 victory point for each scroll you have, including the scrolls on your contract cards. Each courtier in this hall will score 1 victory point for each card you have. Each courtier in this hall will score 1 victory point for each goods token you have, again including the ones on the contracts. And each courtier in this hall scores 1 victory point for the position of your disc on the Mosque track. This one will score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. By the way, you must spend a favor for each courtier you have in the palace, even though that courtier may score 0 victory points. Then score 1 victory point for each building you have in the city. Add the victory points from these scoring tiles if you have any, and if you have reached the last space on the Mosque track, score 4 victory points for each site with the Mosque symbol and with your building on that site. After that, move the year marker to the next space and start the new year. At the end of the 3rd year, the game will be over. At the end of the game, players will score additional victory points from the sets of caravan cards. For each set of 4 different cards, you would score 10 victory points. For each set of 3 different cards, you would score 6 victory points, and so on and so forth. For each card, which is a single card, simply score 1 victory point. Obviously, 1 card can only be part of 1 set. Sum up all your victory points and the player with the most points is the winner. In a 2-player game, you will use the 3rd virtual player who doesn't score any victory points but occupies action slots and places buildings. Suppose we have 2 human players, blue and yellow, then the first human player to take the turn will take this virtual player, select any action slot available, and then activate a site in the corresponding row or column. You may only activate a site without a building. When you do, simply place a building there, and that's the end of the turn of this virtual player. That player doesn't generate any resources and doesn't activate the sites. If the corresponding row or column would have all the sites occupied with buildings, then that virtual player doesn't place any buildings and their turn is basically over. Then at the end of the round, the virtual player would collect camels from other players. However, he would also spend as many camels as possible to move as far ahead in the player order as possible. If on your turn you activate the sites with the 3rd player buildings, you generate resources and activate the tiles as if it was a human player. However, the virtual player doesn't get any resources. When you build walls or deploy a soldier and you protect this virtual player building, you would gain 2 influence as if it was a building of another human player. During the invasion phase, virtual player doesn't pay any ransom, so if their buildings are not protected by walls or soldiers, they will be destroyed. So that's how you play Merv. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be happy to answer your questions. If you like the series, please subscribe. You can even support the channel on the Patreon page. My name is Branislav Berec. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell and hope to see you next time.